Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Thanks for being with us on this Wednesday afternoon. We've got a very fine Wednesday show for you. Ask a Priest, both hours, and our chaplain, Father Sam Keys, is our guest. If you have a question that's appropriate for a Catholic priest, whether you're Catholic or not, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. So you can ask all the usual, maybe theological or apologetic questions. But you might add to that some things of a more pastoral nature, maybe a marital question, a prayer question, a family question, sacraments, all those things. Whatever would be an appropriate question to ask a priest. 888-318-7884. As I said, Father Sam Keys is the chaplain at Catholic Answers. Father, thanks for being with us.
It's great to be here.
Last time you were on, I said, I'm tired of explaining your situation every time you're on. And then I got an email from a woman who said, how can you have a priest on who has 5 children and not explain that on the air? So you can't win. Like, I don't want to have to do that every time. But Father is a former Anglican priest who came into the church in the married state and has 5 children. How's that, Father?
Right. That's pretty straightforward and simple. I got a dispensation, right? I didn't do it illegally, right? Neither did my bishop. My bishop got the dispensation from Pope Francis to do it, so it's all in good order. Yeah.
Yeah, good. And now every time we come back from a break, we need to explain that again. Because I do not want.
I think we should pre-record something, and it could be really polished, much better.
Oh, you didn't think that was polished, right?
No, that was
that's
pretty
hurtful.
I was talking about myself. No.
Yeah, well, we could do that. We could do a little. Our guest today is Father Sam Keys. He's married. Here's why.
Well, I was thinking when you were saying about calling with questions appropriate for a Catholic priest, we could probably do a whole show on things that are not appropriate to ask a Catholic priest. But
the thing is, even when you say questions appropriate for a Catholic priest, you get some that are not appropriate.
That's true.
Ask Darren sometime about the one that Cardinal Pell got years ago.
Oh wow!
But I'm not going to say it on there. But yes, you will get inappropriate questions, Father. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, well, I don't mean like inappropriate for the radio, but just sometimes priests get questions, and I talk about this. I mean, this is for real life, not just on Catholic Answers Live. But sometimes we don't have all the answers. Obviously, neither do the apologists. But there are some things that being a priest does not. I can't help you. Fix your plumbing. I can't help you not make your roof leak. Things like that.
I can help you with that. Use PEX if you got to fix the plumbing. That stuff is so good.
Yeah.
Right?
I've being a homeowner, I have learned a lot of skills in the last few years that I never anticipated learning, and that I definitely did not learn in seminary. But I hear that a lot about priests and kind of regular parishes with facilities where, sometimes the priest is the only one around and he has to fix the toilet. It's something. These things happen. So.
Right. It's the life of service.
Yep.
The number is 888-318-7884. If you have a question for a married priest, 888-318-7884. Already lines are starting to fill up. Father, would you like to go to the phones?
Sure, that sounds good.
Pablo, is that right? Am I going to Pablo? Pablo, right here in California, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. I think we talked to Pablo the other day. That's why I got a little confused. Pablo, you there with us?
Yeah, hello.
Hi. Yeah, you're very welcome here. Go ahead with your question. I just got confused because I thought we had spoken the other day, but maybe we did not address what you needed in the question.
Oh, no, it's probably been like 6 months ago since I last called.
Oh, really? Oh, then I got you confused with somebody else who had the exact same question. So,
oh, wow.
Perfect. Go ahead, Pablo.
Yes, hello. How are you guys doing? My question is, well, thank God my wife is pregnant. When
Amen.
My wife goes to receive communion, does my child also partakes in that? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's talking about questions that people get. I've honestly never heard that question before, but it makes perfect sense that you would ask that. Okay, first, congratulations. That's wonderful that you're expecting. It's very exciting. But to answer your question, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm going to struggle over this one. I think yes, in some sense, you would have to say yes, right? Because, I mean, if you think about pregnancy and the way that it works with the child, they're always partaking of the food that the mother partakes of. So, anything that the mom eats, anything that's in her bloodstream is shared with the child. The qualifier that I would give is just that, there's, when it comes to Holy Communion, there's two kinds of eating, and many of the fathers of the church and the tradition talks about there's both a kind of sacramental eating, which is just the actual partaking of the physical elements, and then there's the spiritual eating, which is that kind of inner reception of Christ into one's soul. And so I think that the sort of full what the sacramental theologians would call the res tantum, or the kind of thing itself, the sacramental reality to which the kind of visible signs point. I would say that probably is not received by the child because that is something that requires it requires intent, right? So it's not something you can receive accidentally. In the same way, there are all these questions. People love to pose the question, well, what happens if, a mouse or a dog or whatever eats the Eucharist? And it kind of depends on who you ask there, but I think that the theologians would agree that whatever they're partaking of, they're not partaking of that res tantum. So they're getting the sacrament in a kind of literal sense, right? They're not eating nothing, but they're not getting the spiritual benefit of it, right? Because that spiritual benefit is for who's it for? Well, it's for the baptized, and it's something that can only be received by members who are of the body of Christ, right? That's how you can get that benefit. So, but with mothers and babies in the womb, it's a complicated thing in that. She is sharing her life in this full way with the child. And so I would want to say that maybe in some way the child is even participating in that sacramental reality too. But I'm not sure that I could say exactly how. Hopefully that wasn't too long of an answer, but that's my stab at it.
Okay, Pablo?
That was excellent. Thank you, guys.
Oh, well, thank you. And again, congratulations. And many... as your wife prepares. Is this your first, Pablo? Did you say it's your first, or you have other kids?
No, this is going to be our first.
Oh, the best. That's
awesome.
The best. Where you find out, what everyone's been having those bleary eyes about. All right. Well, thanks, Pablo.
All right,
let's go to. You too, thank you. Lewis in Frankfort, Kentucky, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Lewis, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Father.
My question is, I've been in a Bible study with some Protestants, and they were talking about the brothers of Jesus, and they're using the scriptures saying where his brothers and naming them. I was informed a long time ago that the word in Hebrew for brothers can also mean cousins. So it doesn't necessarily mean that he had biological brothers. Just like some clarity on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's in fact, I think that was the reading for today, the Mass this morning, that when Jesus goes to his hometown and the people start listing off his family members and saying, wait, you're part of this family. We know this guy, these people. How can you, make all these claims about yourself? And they took offense at him. I think that's the line from the gospel. But yeah, you really hit the nail on the head. That's the traditional Catholic reading of that sees in those terms brothers and sisters just a much more. Actually, just when you say it like that, brothers and sisters, think how often does the New Testament use those terms, brothers and sisters, in a more expansive way. That in a kind of ancient Near Eastern context, or kind of the time of Jesus in first century Palestine, they had the idea of extended families often living together would have definitely created a kind of social world in which those extended family members, those cousins and aunts and uncles, often whom shared a household, they would very much be considered brothers and sisters. You're growing up with them; they're in the same generation, etc. So that's how we traditionally reconcile those verses in Scripture with the conviction, which is not a new. I mean, the conviction of Mary's perpetual virginity is something that goes way, way back. So it's not like this is something that's, just invented, several centuries later, and then we have to read back. So this is how the church was reading the Gospels, even in the early centuries, by the church fathers. So that's not some sort of Catholic innovation.
Well,
Okay.
They also use the argument that maybe Joseph had children prior to Mary, and these would be step brothers and sisters. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean that's a possibility. That is one line of thinking. There's multiple schools of thought on that one. So there are some who think that Joseph was a widower who may have had other children. And Mary's takes Mary as his wife, as an older man, as a kind of protector figure. There's another school of thought, though, that I think has become, at least in my kind of experience, a little bit more prominent in Catholic circles, which actually sees Joseph as not an old man, but as a young man in his prime, and it sees his, which gives you just a different. It allows you to see his relationships with Mary in a different lens, as a true kind of sacrifice and act of self-giving, rather than the kind of old widower. But that is a possible interpretation of it. Yeah.
We have to leave it there because we got to take a break. But thank you, Louis, very much for that call. Lots more calls to come, but there are a few lines open. If you'd like to ask a priest, whether you're Catholic or not, you're welcome to do so. Father Sam Keys, our guest. The number 888-318-7884.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Saints are the heroes of the Catholic faith. They serve as examples for all Catholics, showing us how to lead a more satisfying, more spiritual life in communion with our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. View our comprehensive documentation of saints who serve as theologians and doctors of the Church. It's easy. Visit EWTN.com and click Catholicism. EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Our guest is Father Sam Keys, our chaplain at Catholic Answers, and he's here to take your questions. Ask a priest this hour and next. 888-318-7884. Heading off to Omaha, Nebraska, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. Phil in Omaha. Thanks for the call, Phil. Go ahead with your question for Father Sam.
Yes, thanks for taking my call. Just a quick question. If you're in the habit of going to daily Mass, but then you end up going to Mass a second time during the day, for example, for a funeral or a wedding ceremony, is it appropriate to receive communion the second time?
This is a pretty easy answer. Yes. Okay. The usual restrictions and rules, right? So you need to be in a state of grace. You need to have fasted for at least an hour prior to reception of Holy Communion. But assuming the answer to those things is yes, then yes, it is okay to receive a second time. Canon 917, I think that's right. I just looked it up. Of the Code of Canon Law makes this clear that the kind of main other specification it gives is that it needs to be during a celebration of Mass, right? So you shouldn't receive communion outside of Mass, more than once a day. But if you are actually at two celebrations of the Mass and you're there participating in it, then yes, you may receive a second time. But generally, the thinking is not a third time. That seems to be outside the scope of liturgical law, or not liturgical law, sacramental law, I should say. Does that make sense?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Phil. The number here, 888-318-7884. Ask a Priest this hour with Father Sam Keys. And next we go to Post Falls, Idaho. Theodore, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Theodore, thank you for the call. Go ahead with your question for Father.
Hello, Father. How you doing?
Hello. All right. How are you?
Well, I got a second. I'm doing pretty good. I got a second job as a delivery driver, Uber Eats, DoorDash type of thing. I got 2 kids. I gotta pay the bills type of thing. And I've been thinking, at what point would driving, like accidents, things like that, at what point would it become a mortal sin? For instance, would you have to be driving drunk or willingly driving recklessly, things like that? I don't plan on doing that, of course, but I want to make sure.
Look, remember the line with mortal sin, it has to be grave matter, so something serious. It has to be intentional with knowledge. You have to know what you're doing, and you have to understand, that it's a serious sin. Now, I always say this, right? The Catechism says this. No one has an excuse to not know the basic moral law. So you don't get to say, "Oh, well, I didn't know it was a sin to murder somebody." That's something that just every human being should know on a basic level. So how does that work with driving? I mean, there are probably a lot of gray areas, but I think that to drive dangerously and recklessly in a way that would be mortally sinful would require you to understand what you're doing and to make that kind of conscious choice. Hey, I'm in a rush. I don't really care. I'm going to speed by everybody and weave in and out of traffic. Just knowing. I mean, I'm human too. So, and I drive. I spend a lot of time in the car. So, I understand that sometimes there may not be that kind of intentional thinking behind it. You may sort of just find yourself going too fast or something like that. And so, again, there's where the kind of, I think, it becomes sin when you kind of realize what you're doing and you either consent to it or you don't. You realize, oh, I need to slow down, or I'm being reckless. The other things that you're responsible for are, of course, the situation, right? I mean, if you mentioned obviously driving drunk is one, but if you're driving in a way that that you're falling asleep or you're kind of creating distractions for yourself, you're trying to eat you're trying to eat a taco dinner while driving in crazy traffic or something. Those are places where you're kind of creating a situation where if you're thinking about it reasonably, you should know that you're making it dangerous, and for other people. So I don't know. That's my thinking of it on it. Does that make sense to you, or do you want to ask anything further?
Oh no, just to clarify. So as long as I choose not to deliver these pizzas at 30 miles per hour over the speed limit consciously, I should be okay. Would you say?
Yeah, well, I mean, but there's also a reasonable, you should, if you're being a reasonable person, you should notice, right, if you're going 90 miles an hour, or something, like, you should notice that, and you are culpable for that kind of carelessness. And so, but yeah, generally, anything that's mortally sinful, it needs to be a kind of conscious act of the will.
Theodore, thank you. Thanks very much for the call and for the question. You don't eat tacos while you're driving, Father. That's why they invented burritos. It's because tacos.
I feel like a lot of burritos would be just as dangerous. I think the last time I tried, I remember getting a burrito. It was in recent memory, and I wasn't even I was in the car though, and I thought, I'm just going to sit here in the parking lot and eat this. It got all over me. It was just a mess.
Yeah. Well,
I learned my lesson there.
Let me say more about you.
I got home and I walk in. I'm like, look at me. I'm just a mess.
The number is 888-318-7884. It's Ask a Priest this hour on Catholic Answers Live. Next we go to New Jersey. Ray is listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM satellite radio. Ray, thank you for the call. Go ahead with your question for Father Sam Keys.
Well, thank you for taking my call. I'm in a Bible study, Father, and we just started salvation history, and we got to the chapter 3, verse 15 of Genesis, where I will put enemy between you and the woman. And in the class, we related that to Blessed Mother and Jesus. But we were wondering, how would a Jewish person relate that?
Oh. I actually don't know. I think I'm just kind of taking a guess at this because I have never. I don't think I've ever read any Jewish commentaries on that particular passage. Because you're right, from a Christian perspective, it's just really obvious. We call that the proto-evangelium, which is the first gospel. Right, it's this moment right there, right after the fall, where it seems like things could get no worse, but even there's this kind of little glimmer of hope that's inserted into it. My guess, at least, is that a Jewish reader would see that as a messianic prophecy of some sort. So obviously, a Jewish reader wouldn't see that as referring directly to Jesus, but they would probably see it as referring to some sort of future promised Messiah who is prophesied. The messianic prophecies in the prophetic literature, those are the kind of strongest places in the Old Testament where you see references to the prophets. But actually, this kind of idea of a coming Messiah is something that runs throughout the Torah itself. In fact, I say this because I was just talking about it in class last week. The Jewish scholar from the 11th century, Moses Maimonides, who's like people think of him as like the Thomas Aquinas of medieval Judaism. He's a very very smart man and kind of really important figure for modern Judaism. And he says, that basically anyone who doesn't believe in and hope for the Messiah is not only disloyal to the prophets, but is disloyal to Moses and the Torah itself. So he sees that kind of messianic prophecy as going all the way back into the Torah, which would of course include Genesis. Anyway, that's my guess. But I wish I could be a little bit more specific. But because I'm not aware of specific, what the kind of Jewish commentary tradition has on that verse, but I suspect that it has to do with the prophecies of the Messiah.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you very much. It's Ask a Priest this hour. The calls keep coming. We got lots and lots of calls for our chaplain, Father Sam Keys. We go next to Jeff in Superior, Wisconsin, listening on Real Presence Radio. Jeff, thank you for the call. Go ahead with your question for Father.
Good evening. I have been on retreats and pilgrimages, and I've been to conferences where there have been a variety of leaders in the church, from archbishops to cardinals, bishops, as well as monsignors, things like that. And I'm always fumbling over myself on how to address them. I have a respect for their office, so I often, when I get confused, I'll just address their office. But in a pinch, I'll just use their name, their first name. And I wonder what's appropriate and what's inappropriate.
Okay, so for, you're talking about bishops. I mean, what, you want to give me more, so if you're addressing a bishop...
Do you say
usually it's your I mean, the formal form of address for a bishop is Your Excellency. It's one of those things where it kind of depends on the bishop, exactly what they expect. So you can't always assume. In the same way, like a cardinal, I know that it's not every day you meet a cardinal, but they're technically it's Your Eminence. They may then, very often, that's the kind of initial thing, and then, after that, it might be simply, bishop or cardinal or something like that.
Jeff, hang on, because the music's playing. I want to talk about this with Father a little bit more when we come back on the other side. 888-318-7884. Right back with more Ask a Priest.
Want to know more about the origins of the Catholic Church? Joe Heschmeyer explores the beginnings of Christianity. In the early church was the Catholic Church. Joe digs deep into the words and actions of those who lived right after the apostles to refute anti-Catholic claims of how the faith was lived back then. Order your copy of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
As Catholic apologetics have gotten stronger, Protestant responses have gotten stronger as well. And now they have their own answers to rebut the standard Catholic proofs. Don't fret, we've got you covered. In his new book, Meeting the Protestant Response, apologist Carlo Broussard gives well-reasoned biblical answers to Protestant comebacks. Order your copy of Meeting the Protestant Response today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
As a child, the great theologian Thomas Aquinas asked, "What is God?" Best-selling author Kevin Vost's new book follows the mature thought of Aquinas in answering that question. In clear and approachable fashion, What is God examines God's attributes and considers questions about him that have vexed mankind for centuries. Order your copy of What is God today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Tomorrow on More to Life, how can I help?
We'll help you make sure that the help you give others is actually helpful.
That's tomorrow on More to Life. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Having a lot of fun with our chaplain, Father Sam Keys. But it doesn't have to be a fun question, but it's a very, very serious question, fun question in between, just a curious question, a challenging question, whatever you got. It's Ask a Priest this hour on Catholic Answers Live, and the number is 888-318-7884. I could have let Jeff go in Superior, Wisconsin, but I didn't want to. Are you still there, Jeff?
Yes, sir.
No. Oh, yeah, because Father and I do not see eye to eye on this question. So I wanted to have my say.
So I just want to disrespect the hierarchy. That's
not it, Father. But I'm never calling them Your Excellency, Your Worshipfulness, none of that. If you're a cardinal, I call you cardinal. If you're a bishop, I call you bishop. If you're archbishop, I call you archbishop. And I I think that it's about 50-50 in the Catholic world now. I mean, there's people who are very strict with themselves about using the older European nobility titles. And then there's people who have common sense. I mean, there's people like me is what I meant to say, Father. I'm sorry. There's people like me. And
then there are those of us who think that, if someone is a cardinal of the Roman Church, then I'm going to treat them as such. And if you are wearing the red to show that you're willing to bleed for the life of the church, I'm going to give that. I respect that. I may not respect the person at all, but I'm going to respect the office.
But why is it? What would be the possible disrespect of saying cardinal to a cardinal? I mean,
Probably
to the Pope,
none.
I will say Holy Father if I ever meet the Pope.
Yeah.
And because that's just the common address of the Holy Father. That's what we call him. It would be so weird if you said, "Oh, nice to meet you, Pope." So I would never do that. But it's perfectly fine and respectful and modern to say, "It's very nice to meet you, Cardinal," or something like that.
So you're saying you're a modernist? Is that what I just heard?
I'm not saying I'm a modernist, but I am saying I live in the modern world. I mean,
fair
we're
enough.
not jousting.
Yeah, look,
after this.
to answer Jeff's question, I mean, it really, I would definitely not go straight to first name, right? Use the title bishop, archbishop, cardinal.
Right.
If you want, and if you like being old fashioned, like some of us, you can use those titles, Your Excellency, and if you're writing, I mean, look, if you're writing a letter and you're doing the kind of formal address, I would say that there's even more of a reason to do that, just because it looks good on paper. But it's true that it can be awkward to address someone with these kind of long titles. And I would imagine that some of these bishops maybe don't particularly want that. But yeah.
Jeff?
Yes.
Was that helpful or unhelpful?
Very helpful because, obedience among Benedictines is, a virtue. And, I live in an area where there are a lot of Benedictines. So I'm willing to do whatever is expected of me. It's just that, the feelings aren't always there. But I look them in the eye and I think of the impact I have when I use their title because I see them as a person of faith, as a child of God, just like me, or, we're all walking a journey. But I never forget to smile because I think they need to see that in me as well. And I'm a bachelor. I'm not married. I don't have any kids. So when I relate to leaders of the church, even a common priest, I treat them as a, as a follower of Jesus. And I get emotional about that. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, they have a very, very important role in the church. Well, Jeff, God bless you. Thank you very much. Really very much appreciate that call. It's Ask a Common Priest on Catholic Answers Live today. 888-318-7884 is the number. Oh, we got Thomas. I almost went right past Thomas back to another caller, but it's time for Thomas the TikTok engine. If you've been on TikTok, which someone has shown me TikTok. I've never found my way there myself, but you know that the faith and even very basic things like morals are challenged constantly there. So Thomas goes and finds questions on TikTok, asks them on the show, and then takes the answers back to the TikTok universe. Welcome, Thomas, the TikTok engine.
Hello, host.
I would like to be referred to as your hostiness, please.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead with your question
Could be
for Father.
Your loquaciousness, your clownishness. Sorry, not that.
Oh, I like the second one.
Okay. Well, I'll note that next time. You won't be
All
expecting it next time. Father Sam, thanks for taking this question. Last time I came on, I asked you a question, and you asked how much time you had to answer it. You did pretty well. So, I decided to make it a little easier on you this time. This person just asks, why did Jesus have to die? And they didn't elaborate any further than that, so take it however you want.
Okay. So first, I know for a fact, if you search Catholic.com, you're going to see multiple answers to this question. So if you don't like mine, go there, because I'm pretty sure most of the apologists we have answered this question in one form or another. the first thing I would say is that Jesus didn't have to die. In fact, most of the theologians of the church would say Jesus didn't have to die, if by that you mean some sort of like absolute necessity in which God was bound to this particular thing. God could have saved us in some other way. That's certainly possible, so it's not some sort of intrinsic necessity. However, the world being the way it is, it's hard to imagine any other way. So here's the way that Anselm thinks about it, and Anselm says a lot about why Jesus had to die, and you don't necessarily have to accept his entire way of thinking about it. But for him, the reason why there's a kind of what I would call a contingent necessity, which is to say not necessary in an absolute sense, but necessary within the terms of creation, that for Anselm, in order for God to not allow his creation to fall into nothingness, he had to save us, and this was the only way that basically humanity could redeem itself from the debt that it had made. Another way of putting that would just simply be that for God to deal with sin and evil, he had to deal with the full consequences of sin and evil. And in the world of sin that we have made for ourselves, this is just what it looks like when God becomes man. That's the world that we've created of sin and evil. So, I'm not inclined to answer the question with some sort of legal explanation about how, a death, satisfied some kind of cosmic balance sheet. There are ways of thinking about it like that. But for me, the kind of heart of it is that God wanted to save the world. He didn't want to destroy the world, which meant dealing with the world as it is, in all the kind of ways that sin and corruption have infected this world. And that... In a way, to answer that question, is it's a mystery, because this is just the nature of sin and evil. Like it's so irrational and corrupt that there's not really any answer to it. But to fully deal with it, he had to enter the world, and this is kind of what sin does. That's probably not a great answer, but.
I thought that was a very good answer. That I found that very helpful, but I don't know about what do you think, Thomas?
Yeah, I was struck by when you said that we're dealing with the nature of sin and evil here, and it's really hard to think about that. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to consider those things in themselves because they're not things, right? They're lacks, they're privations.
That's exactly it. And I think all the, we have a lot of metaphors that we've used in the tradition to think about this. Again, I referenced Anselm, and he thinks about it as a kind of debt of honor, right? So this is what we sometimes call satisfaction model or kind of motif of thinking about the atonement, that basically we owe this infinite debt, we can't pay it, and so therefore you need the God-man who's both God and man, who both can pay the debt as man, but has the infinite worth as God. And why the death? It's because that's the kind of total giving of life. But again, that's just one kind of metaphor that the church has used to think about it. I think if you want to kind of give a kind of biblical model, we've been reading through in the daily mass the book of Hebrews, and Hebrews doesn't really answer this question. Hebrews kind of answers it in a more poetic way, and just emphasizing how Jesus gave his life, right? And that I think in human experience, to give life means to die, because to give a complete human lives are finite, so it means to die. But whether the death is necessary in some absolute sense, mm-hmm. probably not. But I think the Fathers and then Aquinas would say, but it's good for us, and there's reasons why that death moves us as well in a way that it wouldn't otherwise, because it shows us the full extent. I mean, it's a kind of demonstration that even though, I mean, look, Christ is of infinite goodness and merit. So even, the smallest shedding of his blood is meritorious. But it's like God didn't want to do the bare minimum, right? He wanted to kind of, he's a maximalist in a sense, in that he wanted to kind of go out of the way to show us just how far he's going to save us and to be with us.
Don't we hear also that like no man has greater love than to lay down his life for his friends, and so maybe the greatest sign of God's love for us would be to become man so that you could lay down your life for us in the first place. Is that kind of getting to the heart of it too?
No, that's good.
All right, well, I think between us, all three of us, we kind of got something of an answer. But like you said, we can go to Catholic.com and see the other ones.
You two did great. Thanks, Thomas. Thanks, Thomas, the TikTok engine. We do have to take a break. We'll be right back with more Ask a Priest with Father Sam Keys right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on. We'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Do you love sharing the gospel and want to learn to be more effective? Join the St. Paul Street Evangelization online School of Evangelization. You will learn to build bridges of trust and make disciples by befriending strangers, proclaiming the gospel, inviting people to the church, and praying with others. We'll ask for a pledge of financial support, but if you are unable to give, we'll give you a membership at no cost. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Beyond Damascus with Dan Demite and Aaron Richards is our show for young adults.
Everybody's talking about encounter. Everybody's talking about that mountaintop experience. What we fail to often talk about is what happens after. What happens beyond that Damascus moment.
Jesus Christ is calling all of us to be missionary disciples, disciples of Jesus who are on mission to bring the kingdom of God here and now on this earth.
Beyond Damascus with Dan Demite and Aaron Richards, Saturday at 8 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kelly, your host. As you can hear, we are very blessed at Catholic Answers to have Father Sam Keys as our chaplain. And he's very gracious, very helpful, very wise man. And you are welcome to take advantage of that by calling and asking whatever question you've got. 888-318-7884. Going down to Texas now. Kristen is listening on 91.5 FM in Texas. Kristen, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Father.
Hello, Father. How are you today?
Hi, pretty good. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you. So, first and foremost, I want to say thanks. I think it's great what you're doing. There's a lot of us who have a little confusion and a lot of things when it comes to our lives and our afterlife and everything. So, it's very appreciative on my end. But my question today is, my significant other has asked me in the past, and it kind of has had me stumped, and I want to say among many others as well, is where did God come from? Like, he's asked me, well, who is God and where did he come from then if he's the creator? Tell me who created him. Where did he come from? Who is he?
No.
And I'm like, so I thought that would be a question that maybe you could answer.
Yeah, okay, let me give two kind of answers that I'll try to relate. One is just the kind of historical, sociological answer, because often I think people who ask this, they might be thinking at it from just an angle of kind of anthropology, and they want to be able to say, oh, well, God is just something that, people kind of invented or came up with, and it's not necessary or something like that. And I think it's really interesting. The Catechism speaks about this in its kind of opening pages where it talks about just basic nature of faith and belief. And, it suggests that even though there's not there's certainly not a kind of universal, religious experience in humanity. There is a kind of near universal set of kind of intuitions and ideas and kind of grasping towards the transcendent, by which we mean, just something that is ultimately beyond this world, that we might call God, right? So the sort of I think the kind of historical anthropological answer would be that there's not, you can't really find an origin. This is just something that is so deeply embedded in human experience as far back as we can go, right? There's just not. So you can't be like, oh, look, back in 2500 BC, this guy named Jeff invented the idea of God, and ever since then people have been stuck in it. It's just not that simple, because it's so deeply embedded in human experience. The second and the more kind of philosophical answer is the God that Christians believe in, the God of the Bible, the God of Judaism as well, the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the God of Jesus Christ. The nature of this God as creator is that he is absolutely unlike anything. He has no origin at all. He has no beginning or end. No past, present, or future. He is eternal. He has no cause. He is the one. He is the cause of all things, but is himself uncaused. And this is the place where Christian and Jewish reflection on the nature of God really kind of matches up quite well with the insights of ancient Greek philosophy, which thinks about, thinking about the transcendent. Okay, where does all this come from? Why is there something rather than nothing? And what those philosophers come to, they don't get to the kind of Christian idea of a personal God, but they do get to this idea that if there is a God at all, if there is some sort of power or source of being, that there has to be a point where that kind of chain of causality stops. Right? There has to be an uncaused cause, and this is not my field of expertise at all. But there are kind of multiple paths philosophically that people get there. There are some that are famously articulated by Aquinas when he talks about the 5 ways, these kind of classic so-called proofs for the existence of God. But you got to understand that the God to which those proofs point is fundamentally a transcendent God. And so to ask the question, where did God come from, is a sense to sort of, to even ask that question, you're not even talking about the Christian God. Because the Christian God, the God that Christians believe in, is beyond all that, as is so often the case, the God that people, don't believe in is very often a God that Christians don't believe in either, because we don't believe that God is just kind of the biggest thing around, that he's just the kind of most powerful thing in the universe. He's not in the universe, and yet he is in the universe as its source at every point. So that's okay. That's just a little entrance into the question. And I don't know. Simon, maybe you have recommendations. I don't know if we have books that deal with just kind of the basic philosophical thinking about God. But
we have a new book called "What Is God."
Oh.
And it's actually very, very helpful. Looks into how Aquinas addressed that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because that's what we're talking. I mean, that's what we're talking about. And so I would, if you want to kind of read further on that, I would commend that to you.
Okay. Yeah, just hang on, and Edgar will get your information, and we'll send you a copy of the new book, "What Is God?" And I think that will address it addresses a whole lot of questions about how we, as Christians, think about God, and it's all taken from the philosophy and the theology of Thomas Aquinas. So I think you will enjoy that book, Kristen. Just hang on, and we'll get it to you. I'm going to go next to Michigan. Aaron in Michigan, watching on YouTube. Go ahead, Aaron, with your question.
Hello. So we're getting a new priest. And, well, I guess I should say I'm coming back into the church and going through RCIA. And so, but I've had trouble feeling comfortable asking the priest questions. And we're getting a new priest now, and he's coming in from Ghana. So he's very far away from family. And I guess trying to create a relationship with the priest where you feel comfortable asking questions without feeling like you're imposing, because he's also going to have 2 parishes. And, also just like a friendly relationship with the priest without feeling like you're imposing at all.
Okay. I'm not. This is that's a hard. It's a good question. In that, I think it's a worthy goal for you to try to have a good relationship with this new priest and to have a good pastoral relationship and good conversation. I think most priests would want that. I think you're right. He might be quite busy with 2 parishes, but I don't know that particular situation. But I wouldn't. He's a priest, so like you don't ever feel guilty about asking. I think, I think that's his job, that's his vocation. And if he doesn't, he may say, look, I really, I don't have the time to give you the kind of long answer that you deserve. Maybe you could talk to this other person. But I wouldn't hesitate to ask to, set up a meeting, when he gets there or something like that, and see if you can, have a conversation. But yeah, don't feel guilty about it. Yeah.
Is he coming straight from Ghana to the U.S.? Do you know?
I believe so. Yes.
Well, that's a big change. So I'm sure a bit of
the
friendly conversation would be welcome.
Came from India. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. Well, that's quite a journey to make. So lots of compassion and help, but I can't add to what Father said. So thank you very, very much, Aaron, for the call. And I'm going to try to get another person on with Father if I can. Alicia in Ohio, listening to EWTN on channel 130, Sirius XM satellite radio. Alicia, thank you for your call. If you can be kind of quick with your question, we'll be sure to get you an answer.
Thank you for taking my call. My priest also has 2 parishes, and I'm wondering if some of his answers have been related to that. I have an 8-year-old grandson who we're trying to get baptized and then get Holy Communion. And when I contacted Father, he said that he has to go through RCI instead of the regular parish school religion classes. Because of his age.
So
I'm concerned about that.
So in canon law, 7 is the age of reason, which means that any child who's under the age of 7 can simply be baptized like basically an infant. There's not really, the law doesn't make a distinction really between a newborn and a 6-year-old. Pastoral discretion might, but the law doesn't. Whereas the law is very clear, though, that once you've reached the age of 7, you are treated like an adult in terms of the sacraments of initiation, which actually means, and this is something where from place to place it may not actually be practiced, but by law, when you're received into the church at the age of 7, you're supposed to get all your sacraments. You should get baptism, confirmation, and Eucharist all at once. That's the norm that canon law presumes. Again, a lot of places, I think, whether or not they should do this is another question, but a lot of places will say, well, we'll go ahead and baptize you and give you First Communion, and then you'll get confirmed with your age group or something like that. But in a nutshell, that's the reason. It's because the law is very clear about that over the age of 7. Now, I certainly wouldn't want an 8-year-old to go through RCIA with a bunch of adults. That doesn't make sense to me. But most places are going to have... if you need to kind of push for something more kind of age appropriate, like maybe he's the only one and you kind of have to ask for something individually, you could do that, and the priest would certainly be able to do that, rather than just kind of sticking him with everybody else. But hopefully that answers at least some of the question.
Alicia, I do hope that answers the question. Thank you for the call, but we have to go to our break now. If you're on the line, just stay on the line. We're going to be right back with another hour with Father Sam Keys. It's Ask a Priest today on Catholic Answers Live. If you haven't called yet, there are lines open, 888-318-7884. Everybody welcome, whether you're Catholic or not, whether you're Christian or not. If you've got a question for a priest, give us a call, 888-31-TRUTH. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Father Sam Keys is our guest, and it is Ask a Priest. Your calls are welcome. If you've got a question that would fit for a Catholic priest, 888-318-7884. My new disclaimer, Father Sam Keys, former Anglican priest, came into the Catholic Church as a married man and has 5 children. 888-318-7884. That was pretty good, disclaimer.
Yeah. Are you going to say how many children you have?
3. I have 3. But I came into the church as a Catholic. Wait, that doesn't... I don't think that's how you say that. 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. And I probably should have some kind of modifier when I say you have 5 children. You have 5 very charming children, sweet, charming children.
Oh,
they are
that's
lovely
nice.
little people. Yeah, maybe
they're listening.
Really nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I hope they are listening, because
I don't know if they're listening today.
They just seem like such nice, cool people. But your littlest one was fascinated by the Christmas balls that hung on the Christmas tree.
Yeah, they ended up
took
everywhere.
them down, he dismantled them, and collected them. It was a very... And how old is he? He's like about 2?
He's a year and a half.
A year and a half.
Ish,
Yeah, he was like a scientist the way he went about it. All right, we got a lot of people on the line, Father. 888-318-7884. Now I've at least done the disclaimer, so I won't get the emails about how can this be that you have a married priest on. Tim in Oregon. Father, it is pronounced Oregon. I have learned over the years.
Oh.
So do it correctly, please. He's listening on 88.3 FM. Tim, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Father.
Hey, great. Appreciate being here. Yes, it is pronounced Oregon. And
thank you, Tim, for that validation.
My question real quick is just the God made the heavens and the earth, and in regards to the earth, scientists say that we spin at 1,400 miles per hour. We have a molten metal core. And my question is, do you believe the oil is in the planet to act like a designed God implement for a cooling or a heat sink system, or do you believe that it's just a renewable resource that we can pull out as much as we need?
That is kind of a science question.
I mean, in short, my answer is that I do not have beliefs on this question. I'm sorry if that's kind of a non-answer, but I just don't know. I mean, those are I would ask a good Catholic, geologist or something about those questions. I mean, I'm a theologian at heart, and so for me, the doctrine of creation, the idea that God created everything out of nothing and everything has an order and purpose, I mean, it gives you this kind of, big kind of endpoint way of thinking about creation, which is that, obviously oil has a purpose for existence within the natural world, but I'm not. That's kind of beyond my kind of knowledge or competence to comment on exactly what it's for. I mean, I do think that God gave us the earth to if you look at Genesis 1 and 2, humanity we are stewards of the earth, which it means it is for our use, but it's also we're sort of managers, and we're kind of these. Humanity has a kind of priestly relationship with creation in that, we're the kind of midpoint or the intermediary between God and the rest of creation. You see this also kind of in Romans 8, I think, when St. Paul speaks about the kind of creation groaning for the redemption of sons of God, because the fall of man and the corruption of humanity has, in a sense, burdened creation as well. So, sure, I think oil is for our use, but it's not, that doesn't mean that it doesn't have other purposes, within the natural order. And it certainly doesn't mean that we should just kind of exploit things in the natural order as if they were created, solely for our use. Anyway, that's my short answer. But if you want to know more, consult with a Catholic scientist of some sort to maybe get a more complete.
I feel like you waited a long time, Tim, and Father saying I don't know is not much of an answer. So I would like to give you a book if you want. I'm not. I mean, not that you should.
Yeah, no, you should give him a book.
But we have 20 answers, faith and science, which will not answer this question, but it will answer 20 really good questions about faith and science that might be helpful towards answering this question. But Tim, I'm very grateful for the call. If you'd like the book, hang on. We'll send it to you. Edgar will get your information and we'll send it off. The number is 888-318-7884. I got time for another call before I got to take a break. Let's go to Danita in Nebraska. And if you're in Nebraska, you're probably listening on Spirit Catholic Radio, just like Danita. Danita, are you there with us?
Yes.
Hello. Go ahead with your question for Father.
Okay, I have a question. I am Catholic, and my mom passed away about 3 years ago, and I have her ashes. She was cremated. And I had a little quarrel with my brother because, she wanted her ashes spread. I don't believe in that. I know the Catholic faith does not believe in spreading ashes. But we come to terms where we could bury her. But I'm wanting to know if it's unethical or whatever to ask a priest to say, I don't know what you call it. I'm thinking about either burying her with her, like in a vault. There's a name for it, but I don't remember what it is.
Columbarium. That's probably what the word you're looking for.
I wonder if it would be okay to have a priest say something over them. And I asked a priest that one time. He said, "We got to bury her. You got to bury her." Like, well, I'm trying to bury her.
There's the church's main stipulations when it comes to ashes is that they do need to be in a stable place. In other words, they can't be scattered, right? So they need to either be put in the ground or put in some sort of kind of stable, permanent resting place. Anyway, but your question about what her not being a Catholic, I mean, that's she generally, if you request it, she could probably get a funeral rite of some sort or other, whether that's a kind of graveside, the graveside part of the church's burial rites. Potentially could get something in the church as well, especially if she was baptized. But that's something you would just need to talk to a local priest about. Different dioceses might have rules about it, but in general, it is possible, even if she wasn't a Catholic, to have some kind of Catholic prayer for her.
Okay, Donita.
I just don't want her to come back and haunt me because I did something she didn't want against her will. But I'm just trying.
You're going to have to ask Jimmy Aiken about that one. He's better than Father with the haunting.
That's true.
I'll have to call and ask him sometime.
Yeah,
sorry, I don't
he'd like that.
I'm sure he would.
It just bothered me. It's like, I'd like to have a place to go put flowers. Because my dad his ashes were spread, and he was Catholic. Yeah, my mom took him up to the Chiricahua Mountains in Arizona and spread his ashes. And none of us took part of it, and I had a real hard time with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it can be very hard for kids because you want to visit your parents. But Danita, I'm going to leave it there, all right, because I have to go to the break. But thank you very much for the call. I hope that the answer was helpful to you. We'll be right back with more Ask a Priest with Father Sam Keys on Catholic Answers Live.
Stay with us for more Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features daily Mass, prayers, articles, and meditations in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church. On the web at magnificat.com.
I'm Roy Brown, Executive Director for Billings Catholic Radio. Catholic radio is arguably the greatest tool for evangelization. Radio has the power to speak directly to individuals and creates a sense of one-on-one fellowship. There is no better way to evangelize than through a relationship where we can share and bring the love and joy of Christ to another's daily life.
The world needs EWTN Catholic Radio, now more than ever.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Father Sam Keys, our guest this hour. He's chaplain at Catholic Answers. And ready to take your calls and your questions. 888-318-7884. Going off to Pennsylvania now, where Kyle is listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Kyle, thanks for downloading the app onto your phone. Go ahead with your question for Father.
Hi, Cy and Father Keys. Thanks for taking my call. My question is, as a Catholic, how can I best explain to my Protestant girlfriend why going to one of her services does not fulfill my Sunday obligation?
So can I ask you, just have you tried to explain this so far? And if so, how has it gone?
Yeah, the explanation I gave was that at a Protestant service, the Eucharist isn't present, and that is the fundamental reason why I need to attend a Catholic service. And so that was sort of my main reason. I didn't know if there was another way I could better explain it.
Yeah, I mean, how did she? Did she? I guess what I'm wondering is there a particular problem or angle that she has on it that you feel like you need to address, or are you just trying to explain in general?
Well, I think that I would need to address a better understanding of the Eucharist and why that is interpreted the way it is in Catholicism.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so two things. I mean, two kind of main things that I would point to. One is basically what you were saying, which is just the reality of the Eucharist and the reality of the holy sacrifice of the Mass. And actually, because the thing is, what's required is not that you receive Holy Communion. What's required is that you be present and assist, in the traditional language, assist in the celebration of the Holy Sacrifice, which means to kind of unite your prayers with those of the Church. And I can't tell you exactly how to talk about this. If I were you, I would kind of lean into the weirdness of it. In other words, don't try to kind of explain it in a way that makes it make sense to her. I mean, so use those phrases like the Holy Sacrifice is the Mass, because I think that can maybe that can kind of clue her into like, wow, he's talking about something totally different here. Like that it's not just a kind of Protestant communion service. There's something different happening there on a different order that Catholics believe in, that's a reality that we have to participate in. But then the second one, the second thing I would say is it's a matter of obedience, because the fact is, the particular form of the law, in which we're obliged to go to Mass on Sundays, it's an extension of the natural law, which is embedded in the Ten Commandments and the commandment to honor the Sabbath day and keep it holy, where Christians pretty quickly reinterpreted that in light of the resurrection to apply that to the new Lord's Day of Sunday, But the idea of, attending Mass and especially like on other days of holy obligation, that is also a function of ecclesiastical law, and we owe the Church our obedience in that, and that also kind of goes to, the Ten Commandments and the honor your father and mother. Actually, we kind of understand that as an extended in an extended way that applies to our kind of spiritual fathers in the Church. But that, and I say to highlight that obedience partly because, again, that's something really different. To understand that, most Protestants, they don't have that concept of ecclesial obedience, obedience to church authority. I know I didn't as a Protestant. I mean, I grew up, we wanted to be obedient to the Bible, and that was it. I mean, the idea of any kind of other authority that demands our loyalty is pretty foreign to most Protestants. And so, that is something in a way that you might as well just admit it up front, and kind of get to the heart of the matter. And, there's a lot to talk about there of why it's actually good for us to be obedient to the Church. And of course, the spiritual reasons why the Church wants us to participate in these things. But if you just kind of talk about it in terms of obedience too, you also, I think, really get to the point where you see the real difference between that and a Protestant service.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you. Thanks very, very much. It's Ask a Priest this hour on Catholic Answers Live. Your questions welcome. Father Sam Keys is our guest. The number is 888-318-7884. Going to Olga in New York, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Olga, thank you for downloading the app onto your phone. Go ahead with your question for Father Sam Keys.
Hi. Thank you for taking my phone call. Hi. Well, I was born in another country in South America, and over there, when you get married, it's like you have two options. You go to the church and a priest marry you, or you go to the civil law, or you get married by civil law. So I got married in 2015, not by the Catholic Church. I am a Catholic, and then I got divorced. And now I like to know if, now that I live here in the U.S., I can get married by Catholic Church. I don't want to be insane.
So let me just make sure that I understood that. So when you got married in another country, not in the church, were you a Catholic?
I was a Catholic, but
okay.
We didn't go to.
So you just weren't. You're right. You just didn't get. Well, look. So I mean that. So I can't. I can't give you like a definitive response because this is something that would have to go. Basically through your pastor and to the tribunal in the diocese. But in your case, assuming there aren't any other kind of wrinkles in this that we're not aware of. That's probably a pretty clear case for the invalidity of that previous marriage. And the reason is because there's a major thing which we call total lack of canonical form, which is to say if you're a Catholic and you get married outside the church without the church's express permission, generally that's considered invalid. And so there's not really any further investigation that needs to be done as long as you can as long as you can show that that's what happened. Unless there's some kind of weird circumstance where maybe there was a general blanket permission in your country where Catholics were permitted to marry outside the church, but I don't know. I know that has happened historically, but I don't know. That's something, you really just need to approach the local pastor who can then approach the diocese and find out for you.
When you say the local pastor, you mean like in the U.S. or over there?
No, here in the U.S. where your local pastor where you live.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Olga, thank you very much. It's Ask a Priest this hour on Catholic Answers Live. Father Sam Keys is our guest. The number is 888-318-7884, and we are just moving through calls, so we will be able to get you on if you call now. Despite the fact that there's really only 2 lines open, we will get to you if you've got a question for Father Sam Keys. David's in Texas watching on YouTube, and you are next, David. David, thanks for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Father Sam Keys.
Hey, thank you for taking my call. My question is somewhat similar to the previous caller. I recently proposed to my girlfriend that, and unbeknownst to me, unbeknownst to her, her first marriage was registered through the Catholic Church in Mexico, although they failed their marital courses, and the people at their church told them that they weren't ready to get married, but they then the priest ended up marrying them anyways. I recently proposed to her, and we find out that her marriage was registered. So we're trying to go through an annulment process to see if that's a role that we can take. But I'm trying to figure out how do I live as a Catholic in the meantime? Mm-hmm. And if the annulment doesn't get approved, what happens then?
Mm-hmm. That's a hard question. I'll just say, real briefly about, what the history you outlined. I this is just my kind of knowledge as an outsider, but it seems like you might have a pretty good case, for that annulment, given what you said about, assuming there's some kind of, there are witnesses and documentation of some of that stuff, that would probably make a pretty good case that it was never an actual marriage. But in any case, in the meantime, what to do? The hard part is to wait. Sorry, my mind goes to Mr. Rogers, who says it is very, 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 very hard to wait, especially when you're waiting for something very nice. But that's true. Waiting is hard, and being patient is hard. And you can try to support one another in that process, and don't jump the gun. Understand. Don't take it for granted that you are going to be able to get married. I pray and I hope that you can do that and you can get married in the church, but you need to face together the realistic possibility that it's an open question, right? And think about what it would look like to be faithful to the church if you can't get married, which is to say you can't, you need to find a way to be friends and separate. Again, that's a hard thing. There's not really any easy way to that. But I think in the meantime, again, try to wait together, try to pray together, go to church together, do whatever you can together, especially on a spiritual level, to assist you to have the grace to, wait properly, and to have that kind of patience while the church kind of goes through this process.
Okay, David?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. We appreciate your call. It's Ask a Priest. And man, people have had wonderful questions. All, it seems to me, I can't think of one that was not appropriate for a priest. So if you've got a question you think that's something I would like to ask a Catholic priest, give us a call, 888-318-7884. Going to Erie, Pennsylvania now. Dan in Erie, Pennsylvania, listening on 89.5 FM. Dan, thanks for the call. Go ahead with the question.
Thank you. My question is, what does the Catholic Church teach about what happens when you pass away? Is it like judgment right away, or is there ghosts? Is it something that is taught there can be spirits that are living in this world still?
Okay, so here's where. So I was just looking on our website to see if we had any little books. We do have a little 20 answers booklet, I think, on witchcraft and the occult, which covers some questions related to ghosts. I think Jimmy Akin probably has a lot more to say about this than I do. My way of answering would be to go straight to the Bible and just point out that we have a ghost story in the Old Testament. It's the story of the witch of Endor, when Saul goes to this witch, this medium, and asks her to call up the ghost of Samuel, and she does. And he's like, "Why have you summoned me?" And he gets really angry about it, and that's kind of the end of the story. And it's kind of one of these moments in kind of the downfall of Saul. So it's certainly not a positive story about interaction with ghosts. But I do, I think that I can see that in principle, the idea of a disembodied spirit, the fact is, when we die, we become disembodied spirits, right? Our bodies separate from our souls. Our souls then go on to judgment, and to ultimately to purgatory, and then from then to heaven, or or to hell, to be separated from God, depending on how that immediate judgment goes upon death. There's a lot that we don't know about that kind of intermediate state, though. So for example, this is something that comes up when you're thinking about the last rites and the sacraments. How quickly does the soul leave the body? How quickly does it move on? That we don't know. So there is some kind of space in there, I suppose, to think about the possibility of, souls lingering around. But I don't know, Si, should we
we can hang on. You got more you want to add, Father?
I don't really have more, but I want to point him to other things.
Okay, hang on. Dan will be right back. Catholic Answers Live.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
Want to know more about the origins of the Catholic Church? Joe Heschmeyer explores the beginnings of Christianity in The Early Church Was the Catholic Church. Joe digs deep into the words and actions of those who lived right after the apostles to refute anti-Catholic claims of how the faith was lived back then. Order your copy of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Catholic Answers Live is 25 years old. That's a quarter century helping people come into deeper communion with the Catholic faith. As we move into our second quarter century, please help us reach thousands more by becoming a Society 315 monthly donor. Right now, when you join Society 315 at a monthly giving level of $25 or more, we've added some extra perks to the other great benefits we already offer members. Go to givecatholic.com and choose the monthly option to start your donation.
As a child, the great theologian Thomas Aquinas asked, "What is God?" Best-selling author Kevin Vost's new book follows the mature thought of Aquinas in answering that question. In clear and approachable fashion, What is God examines God's attributes and considers questions about him that have vexed mankind for centuries. Order your copy of What is God today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Tomorrow on More to Life, how can I help?
We'll help you make sure that the help you give others is actually helpful.
That's tomorrow on More to Life. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Dan in Erie, Pennsylvania on the line with our guest, Father Sam Keys, talking about ghosts. What does the church teach about ghosts? Also talking about generally what happens after death in the church's understanding. The Father covered that, but you wanted to recommend some materials about ghosts, Father, for Dan.
Well, I wanted to, but I didn't have them. I was going to suggest maybe, like you said, Jimmy Akin may have something on his website.
He's got several.
There were just a couple articles that we have on Catholic.com as well. And, in a nutshell, I'm here just kind of like summarizing what I see, which makes sense to me, which is just that, St. Thomas Aquinas, for example, seems to think that ghosts are a possibility. Just it's not something we can deny. He thinks others disagree. And I mean, that would be kind of my view that in principle, I don't see why. I don't see how we could sort of deny in an absolute way the possibility of ghosts, but that doesn't mean that we just kind of blindly accept every kind of claim about ghostly activity, because it's certainly there are other kinds of supernatural activity that we believe in as well, and so there's of course demonic activity and angelic activity as well. So I think. I would suggest you look at some of those other things to get a fuller explanation of that.
And Dan, if you just type into your computer mysterious.fm, you'll come to Jimmy's website for Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. And I would think, I can think of at least 3, maybe there's 4 or 5 episodes on ghosts, either particular ghost stories or the general idea of ghosts or poltergeists. So check out mysterious.fm, Dan, and we will leave that there because there are lots of calls. So on we go to Jack in Columbus, Ohio, listening on St. Gabriel Radio. Jack, thanks for the call. Go ahead with the question.
Yeah, thanks for taking my question. I had a question about original sin and the Blessed Mother. Original sin, Adam and Eve were made, conceived or made with all the graces, and then they lost it through sin. We get those graces back in baptism, as I understand, and yet we can sin. Now, Mary had the Immaculate Conception, so she had all the graces when she was born that Adam and Eve had, but she didn't have the ability to sin, and I was wondering how that happened, because, she never committed any sins, but even, we get baptized and we get all the graces, but then we can sin. So that's my question.
All right. Yeah. So this, I guess this requires us to think a little bit about the different states. Classically we distinguish between Augustine likes to talk about the kind of final perfection in heaven, which is not just that we are not sinful, but that we are not able to sin. So there is this kind of secondary perfection, if you want to put it like that, that's greater actually than that in the garden, because it's where our goodness has been sealed in a sense, in that through. So there's this theoretical possibility in the kind of Garden of Eden story where had Adam and Eve not, taken the fruit and fallen into temptation, that instead of plunging humanity into original sin, they could have actually, sealed humanity into a kind of more perfect state, where we were unable to sin. At least, again, that's theoretically possible. So with Mary, it's one, she's preserved from actual sin, so she's given that original graces, as you say, but because of the unique, again, when we talk about the Immaculate Conception, we're talking about something ultimately mysterious and supernatural. So there's not really a kind of good explanation of the mechanics of it, because we're talking about the idea of basically Christ, kind of reaching back in time in a way to preserve his mother from original sin. But the teaching of the church seems to be that you're right, that she was unable to sin, that due to her, I think one of the popes in an encyclical uses the phrase, because of her closeness with God, that she was unable to sin. Which means that there was simply she still had free will, right? But to understand this, you really just need to understand the nature of free will. In other words, we think of free will as, or at least modern Americans, modern Christians in general, often tend to think of free will as just having a choice, like having the choice between contraries. But the Catholic understanding of free will actually is not a choice; it's a power. It's a power for the good, and so actually, her freedom is because she's so wholly united with the good. It's still free will. It's not that. It's not, so that doesn't mean she lacks free will. It's just that that's not even on the table, and it's impossible for her to put it on the table. Much like with Christ himself. So I guess I'm sure there's more to say about that in terms of the Immaculate Conception, but for me, the most important way of understanding it would be to understand what is free will actually, and to really emphasize that it's fundamentally the freedom for the good, and that's the kind of freedom that we are going to have in our perfection in heaven. That when we finally get to the beatific vision, and assume. The part of this is the idea of purgatory, right? That we need to have all of the temporal consequences of sin purged out of us, but there's a perfection that involves, in a way, taking away those options, and it's a perfection of freedom in that we are so united with God and so empowered to do the good that it's no longer even possible for us to sin. And that's not a lack of power. That's actually the fullness of power, because it reflects the power of God himself. Because God's inability to do evil is not a lack. It's actually a revelation of his ultimate power and goodness. Okay.
Jack, thank you very much for that. I appreciate the call and the question. Alex in Sturgis, South Dakota. Is that the motorcycle place, Sturgis, South Dakota? And listening on Real Presence Radio. Hi, Alex. Thanks for the call. First of all, you got to answer my question. Is that the motorcycle town, Sturgis? Alexis.
Big Rally motorcycle.
Oh, I'm sorry, we passed each other there for a second. So that's the town where they have the big motorcycle rally. I can't hear Alexis. I don't know if can you hear her, Father?
No, I can't.
Darren. Hey, Alexis, we lost you there for a second.
Oh, okay. Yes, it is the motorcycle rally town.
Yeah, okay, very good. That question seemed to throw off our whole call, though. So let me get you back to Father. Go ahead with your question for Father.
Okay, my question basically is baptism necessary for salvation, and specifically for children? I do have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I was born in a Christian church, and so a lot of my family is Catholic, though, and so we've kind of been talking a lot about it. And I just want to know from your perspective how that works.
Yeah, so the Catholic teaching on this is that baptism is generally necessary for salvation, and this largely follows, I think, pretty consistently language from the New Testament, which speaks about baptism for the forgiveness of sins. There's a major caveat that we often, might put with that, which is just in reference to the sacraments in general, which is to say that even though God has bound, this is the language of the Catechism, that God has bound himself to the sacraments, but is not himself bound by them, which means that, to say that baptism is generally necessary for salvation, that does not mean that we have to go around saying that everyone who is not baptized is just sort of automatically going to hell or something like that. One of the most obvious ways, and actually sort of an official way, which the Church recognizes an exception, is simply in that, baptism is ultimately the sacrament of faith, and so there are those who have faith in Christ who have, for whatever reason, often, not by their own choice, have not been able to be baptized. And some of them are martyrs of the early church, who in fact were catechumens, who were preparing for baptism, but actually were killed for their faith even before they were baptized. And so the Church recognizes them as fully members of the Church, and and we talk about it as a kind of baptism of blood, in fact, but that's a kind of metaphorical, extended way, because it's not the sacrament of baptism properly, but it's the fact that they laid down their lives as a clear sign of the faith that they had in God. But generally baptism is necessary. It's a way that God has appointed for our salvation of both cleansing us from original sin and uniting us with His body, the church. And that's the same for children and adults. I mean, the only difference with children is just that they don't have the kind of full kind of rational freedom to choose it for themselves. And so, the view of the church for most of her history has simply been that they should not be deprived of that grace, and so it's possible for the parents and godparents to claim that grace for them, but it is a grace that they do have to grow into. So at the point when they do, are old enough to understand what it means to be, a disciple of Jesus Christ, they have that responsibility to consciously nurture and cling to the grace of their baptism, as opposed to moving away from it. But yeah, I don't know if there's anything more particular that you wanted to ask, but I mean that's kind of an attempt at a summary of the Catholic view of it.
No, that answered my question. I really appreciate it. So, I mean, let's just say, for instance, like a 1-year-old or a baby who was not baptized yet, or we were in the works of trying to get it baptized, and then, something tragic, God forbid, were to happen. I mean, what would happen to the baby's soul?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer of the church is we don't know. I think it's really important that we not presume to speak about mysteries that are beyond our competence and our knowledge. We can speculate about a few things. One is look for a child, especially say you're somebody you're preparing for baptism. Well, okay, there's clearly already the kind of intent to baptize, and so that maybe gives us some grounds for hope. But again, also there's the kind of grounds for hope that the child has not committed any actual sins. There's, I don't. It's a bit can of worms to get into the kind of classical. Thinking on the idea of limbo, but that's something that's kind of largely been marginalized by the church today. But the idea there was just it was actually it was meant to. I think the teaching on that, or the kind of thinking on it, was a merciful idea, which was to say, well, we can't really say these children are in heaven, but we also can't say that they're condemned. And so we kind of imagined this kind of happy paradise in a sense that was short of the beatific vision, but not punishment either. But I do think, I mean, in a way, I think it'd be better for us to err on the side of caution, right? I don't think we should presume on the mercy of God, and so I think it's important for us to to pursue the means of grace that He has given us, which is why when you've got parents and children, I think you should baptize your children as soon as you can. I mean, it doesn't need to be the kind of rush of let's bundle up and run over to the church while mom is still recovering in the hospital. And that's partly because, we have pretty good medical care and it's not particularly likely that the infant is going to die right away. But I mean, that is also the reason why we have emergency baptism. And so, if you're in the hospital, whether it's a baby or if it's somebody who is older, but who would like to be baptized, the church does kind of bend over backwards to make sure that they have the sacraments at those moments, and that's why anyone can baptize in the end. It doesn't have to be an ordained priest or deacon.
And we better leave it there because we got to get to the break.
Sorry.
Alexis, thank you very, very much for the call. I do hope it was helpful to you. We'll take the break, be right back with more Ask a Priest on Catholic Answers Live.
You're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
I'm continually amazed and humbled at the way God can work through me to help so many people. Although I have no idea what the caller's questions will be that day, I trust that the Holy Spirit can use my education and experience to guide, challenge, or comfort those who call.
Mast Appeal with Colleen Kelly Mast. Saturday morning, 9 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
A lot of people think that street evangelization involves yelling out of a bullhorn telling people that they're going to hell. Not so with St. Paul's Street Evangelization. Our methods are non-confrontational and effective. We simply offer information on the Catholic faith along with rosaries, miraculous medals, and prayer. Pope Francis wrote about how beautiful it is to see street preachers joyfully bringing Jesus to every corner of the earth. Street evangelization is fun and fruitful. Join us today at streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Time is flying. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Our guest is Father Sam Keys, our chaplain here at Catholic Answers, and it's a good thing he's here because it's Ask a Priest today on Catholic Answers Live. If you've got a question appropriate for a priest, today is your opportunity. 888-318-7884 is the number. We're going to Virginia now. Renee in Virginia watching on YouTube. Renee, go ahead with your question for Father Sam Keys.
Hi there, Cy. Hi there, Father. Father, I want to tell you thank you so much for your vocation. Can you hear me?
Well, thank you. You're very welcome.
Oh, okay. I just wondered if y'all could hear me. I wanted to tell you thank you for your vocation. So I'm going to try to keep this brief. I don't know quite how to ask this question, but an acquaintance who is a Baptist preacher, minister, said something derogatory about our Catholic Bible and our interpretations. He said that there are ancient manuscripts somewhere in a Texas depository that show and prove the King James Version is superior to what we have. Now, I'm a good, faithful Catholic. I know that's not true. How can do you know anything about that, first of all? Second of all, how can I charitably, lovingly refute that? Or
this is, forgive me if I say this, but there are parts of the King James Bible that are probably much better than the translation that we use. Parts, there are parts that have issues with, but it's a beautiful translation on the whole. But the short answer is, because this is talking about like the manuscripts, it's not really about the translations. It's about the kind of history of translation and what they're based on. Look, Catholicism is all about public revelation, and any kind of notion of, I have this like secret knowledge. That's something that's been going on since at least like the 1st and 2nd century. Like, I have the real revelation. I have the secret thing. There's the whole kind of phenomenon of Gnosticism in the early church, which was centered on that. And there were whole special texts that were associated with that. The idea of Catholicism is about universality, and things are accessible. And they're transparent in a certain way, right? I mean, the apostles' teachings are not hidden teachings. They're not secrets. They don't rely on something that people can't have access to. And so that doesn't kind of answer the maybe the way that the question might be posed by these Baptists. But I mean, to me, that would be the kind of like, well, who cares if there's something in a safety deposit box in Texas? Like, the fact is, we have this whole history, and like, it's reliable. Like, we have the historical record, and thousands and thousands and thousands of manuscripts of the biblical texts which we use, which are all reliably dated to the 1st and 2nd century, etc. The idea that there's this kind of secret history that only a few people are aware of, I think is not plausible on the one hand. It's also not compatible with the character of Christian revelation as we understand it, right? Jesus, you can point to moments where Jesus, had a kind of secondary message just to his apostles, but then they wrote it down, and they transmitted it personally to their successors. So I think we just need to be wary of anything that's that kind of secretive. I would call it a kind of Gnostic idea, actually.
Does that help you?
Okay. It sure does. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Renee. Thanks very, very much for the call. Going to my town here in California, Oceanside, California. Justin in Oceanside, watching on YouTube. Go ahead with your question, Justin, for Father.
Hi, Father. I was just wondering if you could speak a bit to the Anglican ordinariate and some of the sort of liturgical differences, and how might a typical Roman Rite Catholic like myself enter into that or check it out? I mean, is there something that I'd have to go through to become a member of that, or switch?
Well, you don't need to become a member. You don't need to become a member to visit. You can go to our masses like you would any other Catholic church, whether in the kind of ordinary diocesan churches or one of the Eastern Rite churches, right? You fulfill your Sunday obligation in any of those places. So you don't need special permission for that kind of initial, most ordinary parishes have people who are not ordinary members, but who just like it and attend there regularly as their parish. In terms of membership, that's something you just would ask the local priest. The kind of main membership, properly speaking, is for those who are evangelized by the ordinariate, so those who receive the sacraments of initiation. That's kind of mainly what it's for. But that's something, the whole joining thing, that's something you just need to talk to your priest locally about. But anybody can, show up and visit. So, you're welcome. You're local, so, you can come visit us anytime you want.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Thanks very, very much. You personally, your parish is not far from Oceanside.
Yeah,
Father,
we're in San Marcos. Yeah,
so not too far. All right, Justin. Thanks. I'm trying to get as many as I can on. Do you think Joe in Pittsburgh? If you'd like an answer, just be real quick, and we'll get it for you. No, Joe in Pittsburgh. Hi, Joe. Go ahead.
Hello.
Go ahead. Yep.
Hey,
real quick.
Yeah, I had a question. What happens to the souls in purgatory, or the souls that would be deemed to go to purgatory when Christ returns? Like, what would be the result of that?
Okay, so my thought about that is just that when Christ returns, that's the kind of wrapping up of all things. So now, I don't know for sure about this, but I mean, think the issue here is with time, right? I mean, when it comes to purgatory, the church has formally kind of moved beyond the idea of kind of years and days in purgatory. The point with purgatory is that it is a purification, right? Some people think that happens kind of like instantly, but I think from the experience of the soul in purgatory, it's not instantaneous, because it's a process, right? But I think that my answer in a nutshell would be that probably the souls in purgatory would finish that purification when Christ returns. That it's kind of headed. That's what it's headed towards. That kind of seeing the kind of final consummation of all things in Christ. Yeah.
Joe, and that we'll have to leave it there. Okay. Sorry for those we didn't get to. Tomorrow, 2 hours of open forum. Father Sam Keys, may we have your blessing before we go?
All right. The peace of God, which passeth all understanding, keep your hearts and minds in the knowledge and love of God and of His Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. And the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost be amongst you and remain with you always. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very, very much, Father. I'll just say it again in case anyone's confused. Father was a Anglican priest, came into the Catholic Church as a married man. He's got 5 kids, and he's an awful good chaplain. That'll do it for us.
Thanks, Si.
We'll see you tomorrow, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.